Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, other good stuff. So this evening's Dharma talk I have titled Tiny Thieves. Not thieves, thieves, tiny thieves. So what is a tiny thief? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It is an aspect of consciousness. Sometimes people say, when we talk about the precepts, I said you can't help but break the precepts. That's why they call them precepts. Something you break. Can't help but kill. You can't eat unless you kill something. And anything that's living is killing. Anything that is alive and you take its life, even if it's celery, it's killing. And don't say things that are untrue. Don't take things that don't belong to you. And that's what I'm going to talk about, the thief part. You think you're not a thief. Maybe you're not. I certainly am a thief. Not quite as bad as I was when I was 12. A little better, improved a little bit. Now I'm stealing all of your time because I've got you interested in what I have to say. So you're going to be doing something really interesting and fun. But no, I've stolen your time. Some of them I've stolen your whole life. So, tiny thieves, not waiting for the period when someone is speaking, interrupting until they're through speaking. Because if you speak and you take something from them, you take the rest of their sentence. They might have been saying something that was valuable to them, or they're sharing it with you and you've interrupted them. Not evil, it's not bad, but it's a form of disrespect based on thinking that you can talk whenever you want to. Another one, teaching or correcting someone without their permission, thereby taking away their freedom to learn or to understand something on their own. I'm not saying you shouldn't help them, but you might want to wait and see if perhaps they want to see what that is themselves. But no, you want to jump right in and say, no, you don't put it there. You put it over there. You sound like your mom. What were you thinking? Putting it over there. You know it belongs over there. How many times have I told you that? Have you ever had your mom or your dad say, how many times have I told you that? And you come back and say, I don't know, 40 or 50, and then get hit. Another kind of thievery. There are many ways of wasting, stealing other people's time with your chatter, your preoccupation with yourself while you're around them, your vortex, thereby sucking them into that, usurping their what? Their time. Does it sound like I'm being critical? Perhaps. But what am I saying? I'm saying look at the way we interrupt people or take things or think that what we're thinking about what they're thinking about what they're saying and about what we're thinking about what they're saying is somehow better than what they're saying. Most people are polite. They're not going to tell you to be quiet, or unless it's me, I might say, wait for the period. I often do that to people if they interrupt me. If I can, you may have noticed that if I'm talking and you start to talk, I will stop. Not all the time, but quite often, because it's really important what you have to say to me. I can't help you unless I'm really on the receiving end of what's happening with you. And of course, I'm not just as much a tiny thief as anyone, but it's about awareness of that. It's not about concluding or stopping that or changing yourself or being some kind of perfect person who never steals. You're not going to be able to help others if you somehow become some kind of an angelic being, like the greatest bodhisattva who ever lived. Yeah, that's an aspiration, inspiration to do that, rather than particularly some kind of goal to reach or some kind of standard to live up to. Not easy. Not easy being a human being. So perhaps there are some other ways that those little tiny thieves might come along. Tiny thieves, as Unyo said, don't you want to say tiny thieves? And I said, no, I like tiny thieves better. Isn't thieves plural for thieves? But if you had 5 thieves, you'd have thieves. Yeah. Isn't that also some kind of an ointment or something? Yeah. So again, it's about observing the precepts. It's about observing the way we do that, the way we interfere with others. It's about observing the way we take the life of something else because we need to eat. And to somehow validate yourself by saying, I don't eat anything with a mother, or I don't eat anything, you've heard that before. I don't eat anything with eyes, other than maybe potatoes. But that's not really so fair, because a living being is a living being is a living being. So I'm going to need to eat something. The level of the situation may be called murder. It may not be. Usually that's more about social control, society, rather than something else. And of course, there's going to be times when somebody is doing something that it would actually be helpful for you to step in and without their permission and say, hey, you might want to change your direction on that. Looks like that's going to lead into difficulty. So I'm saying it's very situational. We should look at it and say there might be times when you would step into somebody's territory without permission and help them, because you could see the outcome is not going to be so good if you sit back and say, well, Sokuzan said don't interfere with anybody, so I guess I've got to let that person trip over the boulder. So I'm happy to take questions. There's only so much you can say about this particular thing. I thought it might stir up some questions about perhaps this aspect of the precepts or other aspects of the precepts.
She's on bowing. When we look at not stealing someone else's time, it seems like it's an easier thing to consider. But when someone perhaps is not respecting our time, what is our responsibility? And in particular with Sangha?
Very excellent. Excellent question. And I would say, and you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it now because I would like more questions around this. It's very situational. So if you're leading with your awareness and not just your thought processes of right and wrong, good and bad, I'm right, I'm wrong, they're right, who's right, who's on first, that kind of thing. If you're not leading with your analysis and your thought process based on standards and living up to something and failing at something, then the consciousness that you've been training perhaps for years to just see clearly what's in front of you at any given time. This is not protective, does not feel safe for ego. The ego mind wants to know what should I can't do that. What should I do? Like if you come in here into the monastery, somebody just recently was asked to sit in the Doan seat and lead the service, and not lead the chants, but just lead. Nothing to it. Sit down and say a few words. And there's a hesitancy, and I'm not going to name anybody because I'm not here to pick on someone, but there's a hesitancy to do that. And I would say fail. Go in and actually fail at that, and so that you can understand yourself. You can learn what that is about. And so to return to Chezan's question, seems to be very situational. So there might be a time when you would say to somebody, I don't have time for that. Or, they might be bending your ear, as the saying sometimes go. And you might just say, have other things to do. And if you're in the monastery, quite often it's bow to someone, show respect to them, and then leave. But it's situational. And if you're there and you're present in the situation, with a particular person, with their particular kind of chemistry, their style. I would say don't do anything unless you have to. But if you have to, then you might have to do it. You might have to say, this is a waste of time. You may have to say that. It seems situational. I'm happy to respond to further question or around that if you have more, if you want to go deeper into that.
In particular, is a great deal of fear of stepping into those areas. The fear of the perception of the actions or the response triggering a response. And how can I begin to expand my awareness outside of the fear, which consumes so much of my attention? So
stop trying to get outside of the fear. The fear is the intelligence.
You recently asked me to step further into that.
I did.
How can I step into that without leaving my? I don't see how to act. I can't see how to act because the fear can be so strong.
Just keep going. Nothing lasts, including fear. And it especially doesn't last if you don't validate it, you don't try to get rid of it, and you don't cover it up. Those are the three poisons. Do nothing with it. The situation, the person you may be dealing with may be full of fear and not even know it because they're covering it up. And that's part of the reason that they're possibly crossing into areas that you need to say something about because they've shut down in that area. So therefore they're not feeling fearful. They're doing whatever they're doing. And you may have to step into that area and receive whatever fear comes up. Just receive that fear. Not easy. That's why it's called a practice.
Sokuzan, what is it to have responsibility when you're still not clear about what's happening?
So does it look like I'm clear about what's happening? Just a question.
It seems that you can be very, it seems that you can be very clear and very direct about how things should function or look. And other times you don't seem to come in with any particular direction.
Okay, well, that's a pretty good example. Sometimes it's clear and sometimes it's pretty cloudy. Just continue to function. If you reflect for a moment, you being a monk, if you reflect for a moment on your original intention, your original inspiration to even do such a thing is to save all beings, put others before yourself. And it's really hard when you're being stepped on or mistreated or disrespected by someone else. It's very difficult to do that. And it's very difficult to do that and not come out of some kind of irritation or defensiveness or even a little bit of just wanting to kind of get back at somebody for something. Difficult. So I say don't do anything unless you have to. So in that situation, just receive be on receive as much as you can. And so that when you do start to produce, in other words, point something out to somebody or step into somebody's personal mandala and say, I think you should do that. Perhaps you should do, maybe you should stop, maybe you should start, maybe you should complete, maybe you should move this way or that way. Before you do that, that your intention about that is to fundamentally help that person. And that way there's a lot less likelihood that you'll be stepping into a situation where you will be, in other words, stealing their time, stealing their space, stealing their autonomy. If you're in a monastery, and which you are, and if you're with other people who are either fully ordained or lay ordained, but are here with some kind of a commitment to train their minds, then they're already stepping into a really difficult situation. It's called the Sangha. And I'm not talking about the Sangha, the casual Sangha that you can kind of come or go. I'm talking about this is one where you have a commitment to this. You receive a vow, you're observing a vow to be with all things. And what does that look like? It looks like you can't do it. it looks like you can't. It's the aspiration to do this, not the success story. Because the success story is the fundamental success story, if there is such a thing, is to see there isn't anyone there in the first place. There's no one here, and there's no one over there, and that's very difficult because it certainly looks like there's somebody there, and it looks like there's somebody here, and I'm worried about what they're going to do, what they're going to think, or what can I do, how should I function. In your case, you have an actual role. I mean, you have a function as the prior, the Sokuzan. So you have to function in that role. Other people are functioning in their role. Some people, I have a role as a teacher and in this monastery as the abbot. So I need to function as best I can in that way, based on how this is. Nobody trained me how to do this. I'm just doing the best I can. Chisho.
So along the same lines of what you're saying, if I have an accountability to somebody else, then it becomes more difficult. Whereas if I have no accountability, my only accountability is to myself, then it's pretty easy to just do what's coming up.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that conflict when we do have, like you said, Chiyazan has a particular role to play.
Yeah.
And the role has some expectations.
You have some accountability too. You're wearing a raksu. You've been given a dharma name by your teacher, and you've received vows, which we talked about quite a bit before you decided to do this. And I think I even probably said I do it. This is different, just differently with different people. Don't do this unless you have your exact words. Where you said, "No, I want to do this. I want to do this. This is about observing these vows." So I helped you do that. So so there's some accountability there. On the other hand, I let people hold their own accountability. Pretty soon, Chisho, just as an example, if you stop showing up on here, if I never saw you, I would completely respect whatever you did. I would not chase you down. I would not harangue you or accuse you. Or why don't you ever come to the book study anymore? Why don't you like me anymore? I wouldn't do anything with it. I would be as far as I could. That's not that I wouldn't worry about you. I wonder what's going on. I wonder if he's okay. I wonder, I might, it's possible. I haven't done this very much, but I might say, do you want to give me that raksu back? I've only done that a few times, very rarely, but I wouldn't do that as a punishment. I would just say, maybe you'd like to let go of this vow. It's pretty hard to give back the bodhisattva vow, but you could give back your connection to me as your teacher. And don't misunderstand. The way I'm saying this, I'm trying to be as clear as I can. You shouldn't receive the bodhisattva vow. You can still function as a bodhisattva. You can have the vow as something to live up to in terms of aspiration. I'm aspiring to be with all things, to save all beings, to take care of my friends, take care of my enemies, to meet people with as much respect as I can, as far as I can, with my own neurosis or considerations. Be very, very respectful, especially to people's neurosis. That's what's so hard. We see somebody who's nuts and we just want to tell them about it or fix it or leave them or abandon them. So it's very difficult. And with someone who is in the monastery, is fully ordained as a monk, that form gets stronger. But people ask for it. They want this kind of strength. I just spent before I started functioning in this way, I spent over 35 years in a sangha with a group of people that I didn't always get along with so well, had quite a bit of difficulty, and under a teacher that I could rarely talk to. In fact, only talked to 4 times in a private situation. So it was hard, but I'm pretty determined, and you could even say stubborn, and I was going to do this no matter what. But part of the reason that I had to do is I was suffering so much. I was having so much difficulty with my own mind and with my relationships with people. It was just so painful. I didn't know what else to do. So I just did it anyway. And that's what I would say. I endeavor to meet people where they're at. Some people just want a little bit of help. They want to hang out with me. They want to talk a little bit. They want to ask. Somebody might say, "Oh yeah, I've got a quote right here where you said," somebody just told me recently that I told them to Soraksu. And I didn't argue with them. I don't think I did that. I think I think it could have looked that way to them. I can kind of see why it would, but I don't think I did. They might have been going back and forth. I think it was. They were going back and forth and back and forth and back. I said, "Well, do you want to do it or not? What do you want to do?" And then they said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, let's start." But this was after a lot of going back. So they construed that as me telling them to do it. And all I did is kind of corner them. Do you want to do that? What do you want to do? You want to do? They'd been looking at it for quite a while, a few months, longer than that actually. And this is a person that had a lot of sitting, has done a lot of sitting practice. So they, and they're not, as far as I know, they're not on screen. They might be on YouTube, but I don't mind. They can be wherever they want to be. But the idea is to help people, not to get control of them. I don't want to get you to act a different way or some way. I want you to find out who you are. I would like you to be unconditionally happy, not conditionally, because that goes away, but unconditionally. That's what I would like for you. Am I unconditionally happy? I don't know. I'm not concerned with it. I'm not concerned with happiness other than other people's. That doesn't mean I'm some kind of a holy person or a saint or something. It's just that my emphasis is on others.
Shadow bowing.
Yes.
Kind of inspired off of Chiazon's question. Does that hesitation or that fear that comes up around stepping into especially the other Sangha members' territory, is that a form of distrust to that person's intelligence?
Yeah, well, I say a little bit. That's pretty good. Yeah. Just they're going to be able to handle it. They'll be okay. Especially if it's your Dharma brother or sister, the way of talking about it, they're going to be okay. They might get upset. They might argue with you. They might complain. They might come to me and complain about you. That happens occasionally. But we just do it anyway. We do it together. We just do it anyway. We all have a really intense, and this is, I'm not asking you to believe this, but you might want to consider it. We all, if you're sitting here, we have karma that goes back centuries. And you notice me chuckling about that. You're not going to be able to get out of this. Can't get out of it. You might be able to ignore it. You might be able to move to Kansas and have an unlisted phone number. I wouldn't chase you down anyway. Why? I don't want to steal your birthright. I don't want control of anyone. So you do it. I'll help you. It's a big mountain. You can climb it. Yes, sir.
You just said you don't want to steal our birthright. What is our birthright?
The right to be who you are. And how that looks to you may be different than it looks to me. So your birthright might be to go on this path in a different direction. You might want to just not be a monk and be a tailor, or maybe a dog catcher. Or maybe you want to be president of Nabisco. I mean, I'm just being a little bit silly, but I'm saying I don't want to, whatever your birthright is, I think your birthright is to awaken. Otherwise, why would you talk to me? We'll talk to somebody else. I don't have anything to sell. But if you say you're going a different direction, then even though you're fully ordained as a monk and you're a close student of mine, so I would probably argue with you quite a bit, but I wouldn't stop you. I probably would just say that's probably not a good idea, but you should trust yourself. Do what you need to do. Go a different direction. So your birthright is that you need to have your own autonomy so you can find out what your own authority actually is. As Kobun said, my Zen master said, get your own authority. He didn't say, do what I say. He didn't say, do what the Buddha said. Get your own authority. And that seems to show up as, is there an authority? He's not talking about empowering the self-centeredness, the ego, to do whatever it wants. It's to see what is the fundamental nature of authority. Look closely. You find out. You find out. For me to explain that, I can tell you in a couple of words, not separate. You can't, if you find an authority, it's not separate from everything else. So there's no central headquarters. Sorry. Even though some teachers set it up that way, so they're the guru, or they're the Dalai Lama, or they're the head master, whatever. Not incorrect. It's just a way of teaching. Some people need that kind of higher being or higher. Just like you come this direction, you're coming here because you project onto me, and I let you. But since you do that, and since my motivation is about helping you, I will endeavor to meet you where you're at and help you with your permission. But without your permission, I'm out of here. I've got lots and lots of students. I mean, probably 24.
Joe Bowing.
Yes.
Is finding our own authority the same thing as having no backup for what we're doing?
That's a good way of saying it. Except it won't feel, it might be a description of it, but it won't feel like you need a backup. You won't need to have well, I'm doing it like when your mother said, "Why did you spill your milk?" It's that kind of feeling like, I don't know why I spilled it. Spilled. Instead of coming up with some kind of a wisecrack about it. We don't know the whys and wherefores. We don't know exactly why this is happening the way it is. The causes and conditions are untraceable. Our very life of being a person with white skin and blue eyes, or being a male or female, or someone who's, what is that, in between, not really sure about what identity is showing up as far as sexual orientation. Some people have a great deal of difficulty with that, and some people are very clear, and it still goes against what society thinks is appropriate. So I say, and you've heard me say before, if you're not sure which direction to turn, then don't do anything. You might look at the possibilities of going this way or going that way, but I wouldn't do anything until it becomes clear, until you could say, if you need evidence, wait till it's overwhelming. Wait till it's choiceless, that you have to do this, because any other direction looks like not going to be workable. Further questions?
Junshu bowing.
Yes, Junshu.
How can we work with the tiny thieves in our own mind that keep stealing our own time or interrupting ourselves?
Amazing. That's an amazing question. Yes, that's exactly what it is. That what you do is don't feed it, don't turn it away, and don't ignore it. So there's sometimes saying there's some kind of an image of you have a good wolf and a bad wolf, and if you feed the bad wolf, then that bad, and I deliberately leave out the L there in wolf. Which depends on which one you feed. Well, both those wolves are an illusion anyway. They're unreal. They're dependently arisen. I mean, my goodness, and you're dependent. We are, our identity here, me, this old man, talking about something I just thought up, something to talk about what I see. I see that this is an incredibly confused situation of being human beings. I'm one of them. I was born one of them as a human being, as we all were, apparently. And so the way you work with that, Junshu, is just watch what moves. And with you might be different than, say, what happens with Maria or Gyume or anyone else. It might show up differently, but watching the movement without interfering, watching the movement without grasping, without rejecting, without shutting away, slowly over time, and it takes time because we got so much karma in the waiting room, waiting to show up through us, waiting to come through. And it's going to need to come through. You can't just stop having karma. You have to train your mind in such a way that you're no longer in agreement with anything. You're no longer objecting anything, nor are you ignoring anything. And I'm not saying I'm not ignoring the wall behind me because I'm looking the other way. So there's some relative situational ignorance that's always going to be showing up in some way. But don't add to it by finding out that if I block that out even more, I won't even have to have that feeling. So as I said earlier, sometimes to Chazon, sometimes people don't know that they're terrified, and that's why they cover it up with some kind of shiny veneer or shiny patina on the surface of their self-centeredness. So the important thing there, to come back to your question, is be persistent. Just be, I know you're really stubborn. Use the stubbornness. I mean, I'm just stubborn. Plant your damn feet, plant your butt on the cushion, sit down and look that demon in the face. Don't run away. Don't give it a merit badge. Do nothing with it. Just look at it. Anything you just look at, whatever is rising in the mind stream, positive, negative, neutral, if you do nothing with it, just the nature of impermanence, it cannot last, but it will persist if you fiddle with it. It will persist to come towards you. If you push back, it will start to move towards you. If you start to back away, maybe it will grab a hold of you. And I'm just using this as a way of talking about it because it seems to be different with each person. The fundamental difficulty is not the emotion, the negativity, not the emotion, the jealousy, not the emotion, the pride or the shame. That's not the issue, but that's what the materialistic world, spiritual materialism, tries to get rid of or tries to do away with. We try to stop this. So it is about seeing it. It is about seeing the jealousy or seeing the avarice or seeing that, but it's not about doing anything with that, because the fundamental misunderstanding is that there is somebody and there is no solid being in the skandhas: form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness. There's no solid being. Your body is here, but there's no solid being. If you see what this is, I'm not saying you'll be march off into a volcano because you're not crazy, but fear of death is gone. Because there is no death. Who you are can't die. Only the body-mind collapses. Don't believe a word I say. Don't take anything for granted. Doubt everything. Chisho.
Chishabawing. So extending that logic.
Was that logic?
The way I think about it. Because there is.
It's like a compliment,
Chisho
called me logical.
How do we fulfill the bodhisattva vow? The way I'm hearing is, we just act, and if it helps the other person, so be it. If it doesn't help them directly at this point in time, so be it.
So be it is extra. So be it. You're watching something happen, and then you're watching it helps. So be it. You're watching it doesn't help. So be it. No comments to the chef. There is no chef. There's no. The so be it is a way of keeping the self-centeredness operating in some way, so it doesn't lose track of who he, she, they are and what's happening. It's the fundamental nature of duality is to comment on whatever's occurring by either agreeing, disagreeing. That shouldn't be happening. I've worked so hard. I shouldn't be getting that kind of a result. Or distraction, or what problem? I didn't notice anything going wrong there. It comes and goes without agreeing, without disagreeing, and without shutting down. Chiso, did you have a further question? Anyone else? And that's a good area to go into. Come on. Let's dismantle this. Dismantle me. Take me apart. Bring whatever you want. If you want war, I will lose. You get to win. Not interested in winning anything.
Anna Maria Bowie.
Anna Maria.
So relating to that area, I was reading the 8th precept, which is no hoarding material or teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And relating to both Shoto and Chiezon's question, when you're in that situation where you feel like you can help someone, how do you discern between the refrain out of respecting their confusion or intelligence and you're hoarding the materials and the teachings? Bowing.
That's quite a conundrum for anyone. But the way you talk about it, I would say it's kind of a standard, but it's one that I use because it usually seems to be more helpful than any other one. Is don't do anything unless you have to. And it's not about not hoarding materials and teachings. It's about being aware of that. It's observing the precept, not correcting yourself so you're not a hoarder of materials and teachings, or so you're someone who never kills anything, or you're someone who never lies, or you're someone who never steals anything. Any one of those precepts of the 10 prohibitory precepts, including the first 3, or the first, the refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, that's very difficult you can't maintain it. You can't maintain refuge in the teacher. You don't even know who that is. You can't maintain refuge in the teaching. We can't even understand that completely. That's why we keep studying it. And we can't maintain refuge in the Sangha, because the Sangha, they don't even, sometimes it doesn't feel like they even like us. At least the experiences I've had in the Sangha over the last 45, 46 years. And then do good, don't do harm, be with all things, save all beings. It's about seeing how it's just impossible to do that. Yet we aspire to try to take care of others. And when we meet someone that it seems like it would be helpful for them to understand something or know something, be very clear about that. And that's why I say don't do anything unless you have to. Actually, make sure that what you're going to say to them is that there's some kind of a receiving quality in their eyes. If you look in their eyes, you can tell. You look in somebody's eyes and you can tell whether they're receiving or whether they're producing. They're probably producing ideas about you being pushy, or ideas about you trying to pull all that Buddhist stuff on me again. I had an old friend from high school, and the only comment he'd ever make, this has been the last 10 years or so. I'm always surprised how you never try to get me to practice meditation. And I said, would you like me to do it? No, I don't want you to do that. I don't want to meditate. But I'm just kind of surprised that those people are pushing whatever they're doing off on other people. You never do that. And I think I might have said, well, you should have talked to me 20, 30 years ago. I was pushing it on everybody then. Thank you. Yeah, less is better. And, if you depends on who it is, it's very situational. It depends on if somebody you're really close to, your partner or your friend or your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister. It depends on your underlying relationship that you have. If it's an ongoing thing, if some of you are only going to meet once, then you might want to say something. I mean, especially if they ask, what should I do about it? I'm having such a hard time. I said, well, you could try some mind training. What is that? Well, just meditation. You might do that. Probably not. But if it's someone you're seeing quite a bit, then less is better. They know you meditate. They're watching you. They're evaluating you. They're judging you. They're waiting. And as soon as you lose your temper up, you get upset. Oh, I thought you meditated. Doesn't that stop you from getting mad? Oh, that's too bad. You're so mad. That must be really hard for you being a meditator and all. Does that sound like sarcasm? That's because it is sarcasm. I am sarcastic about that. But you've experienced this. You know what I'm saying. It shows up in other areas too, not just and you may be a person who never runs into people who are sarcastic.
Bowing.
Yes.
In those situations, I found that someone's desperation doesn't necessarily mean that they're receptive or ready to receive.
Very good point. Very, very good point. Yes. Their desperation can be very heartbreaking to see that if they would try this, it would be wonderful. But it's like they're not open to it. They're closed up with their ideas, their hopes, their fears, their beliefs, and their opinions, and so on. And there's no opening there. So that's why you need to look in their eyes and see if they're even ready to. If they're like even listening. Eyes listen. You can tell if they're listening.
Sokuzan,
Yes, sir.
there's a question in the chat box.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's Ivan or Ivan, but
It's Ivan.
What?
It's Ivan.
Ivan bowing. Addressing thieves of the self. Is this the same as the ego?
Yeah, well, there's a self-centeredness there. So there's a joining of me and what I'm about to do, or me and what I need to say, or this person saying that, and so we tend to be, instead of actually being on receive, unless you're doing a lot of sitting meditation, it's going to be very, very difficult to see the boundary or the separation, you could say, between receiving and producing. Sometimes they feel very similar. This is why it's so necessary to be on receive as much as you can. That's why we sit down, look at a wall, and just receive what's there. Passion, aggression, ignorance, craziness, confusion, daydreaming, sexual fantasies, fantasies about buying a new car or getting another job, or any kind of anything going on. Daydreams about the future, memories of the past that were really good, really bad, really whatever. Just receive. Everything is grist for the mill, so to speak. Everything can be included. Everything, and especially when it's arising in your mind stream. This is how we train our mind to be on receive. So when we get up off the cushion and when we talk to somebody, we're receiving. You're receiving. You might not get a credential for that. The only thing that may show up a little bit is a feeling, especially if you've been doing a lot of sitting meditation, is not knowing what in the hell's going on, or who you are, or what's right and what's wrong, and what's up and what's down. You get used to it. You don't need to know that. The ego mind will reconstruct itself if it starts to freak out. That's why you, as far as I can see, and I'm not saying this is absolutely the truth, because a path will bring you back into that particular journey that is about, excuse me, that particular journey that is about finding out who you are, finding out your true identity. Don't settle. Just continue to go.
Maria bowing.
Maria.
Following on what Jinju asked about, it seems to me that fear is, for me, is not like a tiny thief. I would put it into the category of rather big ones. And I'm wondering, in the context of your response to Chezan, that fear is an intelligence, how those two go together?
Fear and intelligence?
No, for me, fear is something which is stealing away attention from me being able to be connected. And you are calling fear an intelligence, and I'm trying to understand how it works together.
Yeah. So fear is not separate from intelligence. But it's just a misunderstanding. That's why it's so necessary to not dispense with the fear. Don't jump away from the fear into what's causing the fear. All you're doing is, you might as well be getting right on a merry-go-round. And you'll be right back to why, because. Why, because. Why? The whole world is doing why, because. And you can take it in society or structure, right up to the any level of whatever government, any level of psychology or philosophy. Any of those areas are strong polarity. Why? Because. And what you're being asked to do or recommended to do is to look at the fear. And of course, when that first shows up, it's fear because of that, or fear because of that. And then at some point you may start to have fear without having any source. That's when you can actually look at the texture of the fear. And you can also see the cause of the fear. And by not focusing on the cause so much, but just looking at the texture of the fear itself, you begin to, and I'm going to say this in a way that may arouse some more questions. Make friends with that. It's just energy. And I don't mean to dispense with the personal feeling of being threatened or having your sanity taken away or your safety taken away. Of course, that's why it's called fear. But insofar as you can, using the sitting practice of meditation to train your mind to see clearly, continue to return to that. When the fear arises, don't leave. When the fear arises, don't cover it up. Don't cover it up with any idea or judgment or opinion, or actually just be there with it. Be there with it. And again, I say, excuse me, I don't say maintain that. Just flash on it. You don't need to maintain it. You can just flash on the fear, then you can let it back off. Then you can flash on it again. So go slowly. Train your mind. Spend time sitting still and watching the movement of the mind, so that when these fears come up, perhaps right in meditation, then you're in the middle of working with that kind of energy that is more like dancing with it rather than fighting it or running away from it or covering it up. Fighting it, running away from it, or covering it up.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm wondering whether it's maybe a dynamic that with more sitting, that fear may increase.
Well, it could get more intense, but I would say sit anyway. And right after I say that, I'm also saying, you could trust yourself and say, just because the teacher's saying sit more anyway, I'm also saying at the same time, don't overdo it. If it seems to get really intense where you're kind of coming apart at the seams, you might want to back off a little bit, and then maybe approach it in a softer way, or maybe change the time of day that you're practicing, or the other way. And I think we may have even talked about this, because I talk to people about when people have a lot of intensity. I say, go look out the window. Don't look at the wall. Go out and look, so you're looking off into space more. You can also sit in a room and look across the room you can do shikantaza with a lot of space in front of you. I don't think it's a good idea to watch TV, but I don't know, maybe that'd be a good idea. Any further questions? Don't watch TV, by the way. That was meant to be sarcastic.
Sokuzan,
Yes, sir.
earlier you were talking about looking into somebody's eyes and being able to see if they're producing or receiving.
Yes.
And one of the practices that you sometimes talk about is eye gazing.
I do.
How does the practice of eye gazing help us to meet situations where they are, meet people where they're at?
Yeah. Well, I think you've done enough of that. You could probably talk about it yourself, but it's just the eyes are, looking at someone's eyes. It kind of it takes the thinking mind out of gear. It doesn't do away with it totally, but it takes it out of gear and allows one to receive. There's less producing going on. Still some maybe, but most of it is just receiving. So this is why I sometimes, if I'm talking to two people who are having difficulty, whether they're monastery residents or people in a relationship, I say, sit down face to face, bow to each other, and then discuss your relationship. But first, you might want to just look in each other's eyes for a minute or two. It's not very long, but it's an extremely long time if all you're doing is looking in someone's eyes. And then you can, after you do that, then it's kind of a reset to help you reset with your original intention to be together, to love each other, to respect each other. So it's a way to do it without a bunch of mumbo jumbo words or philosophy around it. Just sit down and look at the other person. And you can do that for longer than that period also. So I think what it is, it's more about just the spaciousness of it rather than the content. It's just an open dimension where you're just being with the other person, very simply. Further question, Shoka?
What is the spontaneous production that's arising when you do look at somebody, like looking at sometimes what looks like personality or identity moving around?
Are you ready? Fear. If you're looking at somebody, the eyes are looking at something nothing has happened there except someone else looking back at you. Just receive. And whatever comes, I don't care what comes, receive. Because if you're producing, if you're reacting to what's coming, then that has to do with fear, or a more subtle way of saying it, the desire for control, or the desire not to be controlled by someone, which has to do with ego or identity. It seems to work differently for different people with different dynamics. There's more there if you have more questions around that.
I guess if that kind of production, if there's a production out of fear, how can you, or what is the receiving?
Well, if you see that you're producing, and you see that you're producing to cover up the fear, then that's awareness. That's why we do sitting meditation. It's not so we can be really calm and kind and cover up our aggression, our passion, aggression, ignorance, but so that we can see it, so we can be responsible for our karma, so that we can be so open and so magnanimous that we can accept the karma, that we can accept whatever's coming towards us, and not fight with our world. Don't miss your life, because if you miss this one, you're going to be back. It's like a big schoolroom. You'll be back again, looking at it again. Maybe not with this body, maybe with a different body. Maybe as a parent. Possible. Nothing is impossible. So whatever you're receiving, just receive. And if you find yourself as you're reacting to how somebody looks or what you're picking up from them, whether it's in your dynamic or anyone else, would be generally, I think, the truth is, if you're producing anything, it's probably coming out of some kind of anxiety or some kind of possibly fear or insecurity around having someone look right at you. More?
Not yet, thank you.
Thank you for the question. There's a lot of room in there for more inquiry if you have it. If not, we can always close, whatever you'd like to do. If you have questions, I'm here.
Geez, I had one more question from earlier.
Certainly.
You talked about returning to your original inspiration.
Yes.
And referred to the Bodhisattva path. And oftentimes it seems my inspiration is more selfish than that. It's just purely being uncomfortable being with myself, just my own suffering. Is there a difference between my suffering and the Bodhisattva path?
No. No, not separate. But just continue. Describing the inspiration. Inspiration is not separate from anything. And that's it's not something you can think about. That's why it gives the ego such a rough time, because the ego is used to generating ideas, concepts, ideas, judgments, evaluations, opinions, logic, reason, and realization you could say transcends that. And the Bodhisattva path aspires to go beyond the self-centeredness and put others before ourselves until we see that there aren't any others. And isn't even a bodhisattva. That's why it's a spiritual path and not a mundane path of accomplishing something, getting somewhere, getting credentials, and having a success story.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Okay, Unyo's looking at me funny. No, she's pointing at what is that? Oh, it's a clock. Pointing at a clock. Okay, we can dedicate the merit in the monastery, I think. They can lead us from there. Into all places, so that we in every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way.
Ichibu Shizonbu Samokosa SokukoJi. The 10 directions of 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.